everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Strike Noise, your weekly baseball history podcast. I'm one half of the show. My name is Jeff, and the other half is Mark A. Johnston, who is just chomping at the bit today to talk about some baseball history.
I was telling my wife all about some great baseball history, and she just looked at me vacantly.
I know. Understand. My wife doesn't really care about hearing about baseball history.
There's something wrong with both of them, I guess.
Well, I mean, they married us, so they're definitely.
Well, that's a good point. They're both very nice, attractive, talented women, but they have such poor taste in men.
But anyway, enough of that. Let's get to some baseball history. Mark, this is show number 255. Once we surpass 250, they actually let us keep going. Let's get into our BP segment before our main segment of the show, where we're gonna revisit a past topic and get a little bit more in-depth, information than we provided, if that is possible. But I can guarantee you it is. Now, Mark, remember we've talked about, I don't even remember his first name. Is it Mike Zimchinsky?
Yeah, Zimchinsky.
Well, at least we got Mark. There we go. His nickname's Scrabble. And if you look at how his name is spelled, it makes sense because there's just 18 random letters thrown together. And he's like, yeah, it's Zimchinsky. A new player has joined the chat here in terms of a weird name. His name, well, weird. I don't want to say that. It's a cultural
chart
name.
Like.
Yes. Well, his nickname is the Password.
The Password.
He has not played in the big leagues yet, but he is an outfielder for the Boston Red Sox, and his name is Josnixon Garcia.
Wow.
His name is spelled Jhostynxon.
Wow. Wait. A Y and an X?
Yeah, Josnixon. And a J.
Wow.
How many names have a J, a Y, and an X? Jackson? I guess.
Jackstoni.
I don't know. But his nickname is the Password. Look out for him. He's from Venezuela. He's an outfielder right now. He's just an A-ball. So it might be a while. But that led me to find another guy I had not heard of before. He played for 4 years, all of them for San Diego in the early 80s. His name is Doug Goosh. His name is Doug Goosh. His nickname is iChart. And you're like, oh, Doug Goosh. All right, why? Well, Goosh is spelled Gwosdz.
Wow.
Goosh.
Huh?
Yeah. So his nickname was iChart. I had not heard of Doug Goosh before, but he was a catcher.
You think people call him Gwosdz?
I don't.
On accident?
I don't know what that means, so I don't.
Well, that's how I would pronounce his name.
I would just assume that he is of some like Eastern European heritage.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But I would have not come up with Goosh because it's actually kind of a cool name, Goosh. All right, Mark, it's another week, another Seinfeld giveaway somewhere in baseball because it's got to be done. This time it's the Brooklyn Cyclones. They're the Mets High A affiliate. They have a special promotion, and they're calling it Seinfeld Night. This is on August 10th, and they will be giving a bobblehead of George wearing a very, very large Gore-Tex jacket with the phrase George Costanza, the original Bubble Boy, under it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'm looking at the bobblehead here. It's okay. I think they should have really made the jacket bigger because I rewatched part of the episode where he appears in this the first time, and it is just huge. And here his head is actually bigger than the Gore-Tex jacket, and I do like to say Gore-Tex. This is a good giveaway. I'm wondering, what are there more of around baseball? Seinfeld nights, Star Wars nights, or The Office nights? Because there's a lot of giveaways for those.
I think every team has a Star Wars night.
Oh, at least one, yeah.
Yeah. Some have multiple. But yeah, there are more and more Seinfeld nights, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then being an Office fan, big Office fan myself, I know there's a lot of Office nights too, where Stanley from The Office is just like making a living, touring the minor leagues, showing up for an Office night.
Nice.
So I saw this. This is reminiscent of a Seinfeld episode. 1963. This came up on Antiques Roadshow, by the way. A 1963 game-used bat by Mickey Mantle. And there's a great backstory to this. So this woman has this bat. She's presenting it to the appraiser there. And she's got the whole backstory for this bat. Her name is Nancy. She, as a small child in 1963, as a girl, her name's Nancy, pretended to be a boy, though, because she wanted to play Little League Baseball, and girls weren't allowed to play Little League Baseball. So she's playing under an assumed name, tucking the ponytail under the hat, I guess. I don't know. And so this Little League had a contest, and the winner was going to get to be the bat boy for the Yankees for a game. So she entered and wrote down that her name was Jimmy. So, of course, she's going to win this thing. But upon finding out that she was a girl, the Yankees were like, a girl? We can't have that. This is baseball. But then somebody, forward-thinking somebody in the front office said, hey, this could be a great story. Let's get this girl to be a bat boy or bat girl, whatever they're going to call it. Look how progressive we are. We're not the Red Sox.
The bat person.
Yeah, the bat person. So they asked her who her favorite player was. And, of course, I think everybody's answer at that point was Mickey Mantle. So after, no doubt, mansplaining to the girl who Mickey Mantle was and why he should definitely be her favorite player, she was on her way to be the honorary bat girl. Mickey came over to talk to her before the game. And, boy or girl, it doesn't matter. Kids are stupid. And she asked Mickey Mantle to hit a home run for her during the game. Because, like I said, kids are stupid. He replied, sure. Just one? Not two or three.
He's no Paul O'Neill.
Yeah, he's no Paul O'Neill. Regardless, though, he hit one in the game with this bat, and he presented her this bat after the game. She's got pictures and a whole bunch of stuff that shows that this is the bat that he hit a home run with in 1963. So this bat is worth quite a bit of money. I don't think she's going to part with it, but it's a really good story.
Man, that's awesome.
Very reminiscent of a Seinfeld episode with Paul O'Neill.
Did it involve a birthday card signed by the entire organization?
No, it did not.
Okay.
There was no birthday card being passed around. Speaking of New York Yankees and home runs, this is interesting, especially with all the updated stats that have happened with Major League Baseball, including Negro League stats as a major league, and also reshuffling some of the top tens with these stats. Babe Ruth is credited with 714 career home runs. Should it be, though, 715? In 1918, when he was with the Red Sox, he had a walk-off homer with a man on base. So the way that games are scored now, he would get a home run, and he would get 2 RBI on that, and he would cross home plate and get credited with a home run. But before 1920, the game ended when the winning run scored. So this case, Ruth was only credited with a triple.
Wow.
And not a home run. So I guess this is not going to change, because you'd have to go back and game logs for games not including Babe Ruth might be a little hard to come by. But should he have 715 as opposed to 714? And who knows, he might have had others too. I don't know.
That's true. My gosh, 714 is such an iconic number, too, that you associate with Babe Ruth.
Yeah. For me, he absolutely should be credited with an RBI and a home run here. But again, then you'd have to go back and like, well, if you walked on 7 balls, like used to be the rule, then you got to go back and give everybody that got 4 balls but not 7 would technically get a walk. I understand the conundrum here, but that's very interesting. Something else here. I don't look at foul polls a whole lot, or fair polls, depending on how you want to call it. But did you know that there is only one team in all of baseball that has not had a yellow fair poll?
No.
And can you think of who it might be?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm going to go with the Reds, since they are, red.
Well, that's a good guess. That's a very good guess. But no, they definitely have yellow. I was thinking before I found out the answer, maybe it was someone in a dome. Because remember, sometimes domes didn't have actual poles. They would have nets over there that would be suspended. But no, the answer is the New York Mets.
No kidding.
Both in Shea Stadium and Citi Field, they're orange. which now that's all I can look at whenever there's something down in a corner. No matter what game I'm watching, is what color is that foul ball? Oh, it's yellow.
I never noticed that.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that. I'm sure everyone will be looking. It
goes with
the
decor. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, well, it absolutely does. I mean, the Padres have like a Jack in the Box head on the top of theirs, and I mean, people are advertising on these things now, but they're all still yellow, not orange. Mark, this show is debuting on June 28th, and a couple of good debuts here today. Well, one good debut, and that's George Sisler. Made his debut. Hall of Famer, made his debut in 1915. This is a quote from Bill James, because I know the name George Sisler, and I'm guessing most of our listeners too, couldn't tell you anything about him other than I know he's a Hall of Famer. Didn't even know what position he played, which I'm not sure that's a good thing for a host of a baseball history podcast to admit, but we're very forthcoming here about our shortcomings. This is a quote from Bill James about George Sisler. Quote, "He is probably the only player other than Lou Gehrig who can reasonably be considered the greatest first baseman ever in terms of peak value. The reason I say that is the other top contenders, most notably Jimmy Foxx and Willie McCovey, were the same type of players that Gehrig was, and thus they can be directly compared to him, a comparison that they clearly lose to Gehrig. But the man I'm referring to was a different type of player. He didn't have the home run pop, but he hit for a higher average, was faster, and a better defensive player than Gehrig, and the comparison between the two is not easy." So that's, end quote, that's about George Sisler. That's from Bill James. So I looked at George Sisler's numbers, not being familiar with him. Lot of black ink, as you would suspect. One MVP. But of course, this was in the time where you could only win MVP once and then you were not eligible to win it again. But played 15 years in the big leagues, 12 for the St. Louis Browns, 3 for the Boston Braves, and then a sandwich year. I guess he was traded in 1928, where he played 20 games for the Washington Nationals. He also missed an entire year. His age 30 season he missed due to illness. Wow. So a Hall of Famer, and he missed a whole year due to illness. Hit over 400 a couple of times, led the league both times. He hit 420. Nice. Wow. In 1922. That was when he was MVP. Led the league in runs, hits with 246, 18 triples for the third year in a row. He hit 18 triples. Over 100 RBI, 51 stolen bases. He led the league 4 times in stolen bases. Which then led me to a search of first baseman and career stolen bases, because they mentioned that he was much faster than Lou Gehrig. George Sisler is second all time. And I did this on StatHead. I said 80% of their career games need to be at first base to qualify for this. He is number 2 all time with 375 career stolen bases. Charlie Comiskey is number 1. With 416.
No, I wouldn't have come up with that.
No, I wouldn't have either. So then I went down the list here, and I wanted to find who is the closest contemporary first baseman with the most stolen bases. I had to go all the way down to number 17, where Jeff Bagwell with his 202 career stolen bases. No one else above that. Let's see, the most contemporary above that would be Joe Judge. He finished his career in 1934. That is the most contemporary before you get to Jeff Bagwell.
Wow.
Some names in there that we've talked about before: Hal Chase, Cap Anson, Fred Merkle, Dan Brothers. Those are all above Jeff Bagwell, but below George Sisler. If you keep going down, you get to number 24 and Paul Goldschmidt with 162. And then you're going all the way down to Orlando Cepeda and Gerald Perry, and that's in the 30s. So stolen bases for a first baseman, just not a thing. But George Sisler made it a thing.
The one thing I did know about Sisler is that he held the record for hits in a season.
Yep.
With 257 for a long time. Yeah, and Ichiro broke that.
Yeah, that was his 1920 season for Sisler, where he only hit 407, 257 hits. Only struck out 19 times in
Oh my gosh, that's
692
ridiculous.
plate appearances.
That's ridiculous.
My.
Speaking of Ichiro, I happily booked my hotel, my Verbo, for Ichiro's induction ceremony.
Oh, in Cooperstown.
Absolutely.
Wow, congratulations. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited.
Now, you've been to the Hall of Fame before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Oh, then you will know how great it is. And on Hall of Fame weekend, it is 10 times that, because there are people everywhere. You walk down the street and you just see former players, and there's so many things going on. It is incredible. I'm excited for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
When is he going in? I don't remember.
25.
25. All right. And obviously, first ballot Hall of Famer.
I hope so.
I think you're pretty safe.
Be there.
I think you're pretty safe in having booked that. All right. One more minor debut from today, June 28th. Derek Bell in 1991 made his debut, which means that sometime between now and the end of the season will be the anniversary of Joe Carter raffling off Derek Bell's new custom Ford Explorer to a lucky fan, which is now it's now announced, but then it was unbeknownst to Derek Bell that was going to happen. And Joe Carter drove this Explorer onto the field pregame to show fans what they could possibly win. And Derek Bell was quite shocked, obviously.
Classic moment. You can find that if you want to see it. It's all over the internet.
Yeah, and we also it was on the Now It Can Be Heard VHS tape that you and I watched. You can find that on our YouTube channel where we saw that as well. Yes. Also, one of the Killer Bees at one point in Houston, which, just like the Killer Bees from the old WWF, they would just swap out because they wore masks. And the Killer Bees in Houston, just anybody with a B anywhere in their name, where Bagwell and Biggio were playing. Oh, you're a member of the Killer Bees now.
Yes.
Like Susan B. Anthony could have been a member of the Killer Bees had she been on the Astros.
She wasn't that good defensively.
No, very liability. Yeah, hands of stone and not really great range. Where else would we go with that? Also, not a debut, but their final game in the major leagues in 2011, Wayne Franklin played his last big league game, and I say that because I will be facing him on Sunday.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
nice.
He walked me his first time I faced him, and I believe has struck me out several times since then.
I would pitch around you as well.
All right, that's going to wrap up debuts. That's going to wrap up our BP segment. Grounds crew out here doing beautiful work. They've striped the field. There is a Ricky Henderson profile picture out there in center field. They've done a great job out there. A lot of work done here on the field. But what that's going to allow us to do is going to get it into the main segment of the show. Like I said, we are going to revisit a topic that we have talked about in the past, and that topic is Pete Browning, the Gladiator, the original Louisville Slugger. We did a whole episode on him way back in the hundreds. What is exciting here is there's a new book coming out about Pete Browning by author Tim Newby. It's called The Original Louisville Slugger, The Life and Times of Forgotten Baseball Legend Pete Browning. And he's not forgotten here.
Sure.
We talk about him several times. I mean,
obviously not forgotten on Two Strike Noise.
No, I mean, whenever we see Chicken Wolf, or I swear everybody in the early baseball played for Louisville at one time. Joining us today is Tim Newby, who is the author of The Life and Times of Forgotten Baseball Legend Pete Browning. Only Tim, he's not forgotten here on Two Strike Noise. He's one of our favorites of all time. But we thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to coming on and talking about Pete and sharing some stories about him.
Did an episode, episode 157. That's almost 2 years ago, but it was such a great episode. I remember finding out about Pete because he kept showing up on a lot of teams and players that we were talking about. And so I did some research into him, and I was shocked that he doesn't get talked about more than he does, because he is such a character, as well as just a great baseball player. But he played in Louisville for the Colonels and a couple of other teams there, and a Louisville native as well. Can you tell us a little bit of history about baseball in Louisville to start out with?
Sure. So Louisville in baseball, the first club formed there in 1858. Pete was born in 1861, and baseball became pretty popular in Louisville. There was a number of clubs popping up all over the place, like there were in a lot of other cities at the time. Pete was pretty athletic, started playing baseball really young. There was a really good group of friends he was close with. A number of them actually go on to play professional baseball as well. And they played for clubs in the area. They ended up playing for a club, the Eclipse. There was the Rex Hughes brothers, and the oldest one kind of ran the club and coached and managed and did all that. And they would kind of play that kind of typical circuit in the city. They would play other teams when they came in and visited. They'd play other kind of local, kind of those semi kind of pro teams as well. In 1882, when the American Association was going to get started, they were starting to look to different cities. They looked to Louisville, and they were kind of looking to teams that had, or cities that had established teams already. And Louisville was definitely one of those. The Eclipse was one of the kind of best amateur semi-pro teams in the country. And they were also unique because a lot of these other kind of semi-pro amateur teams kind of had players from all over the place, whereas the Eclipse was kind of all homegrown. It was their guys. It was these young guys who played together. They kind of grew up in most of them in the west end of Louisville. They all kind of, went to school together. Well, in Pete's case, they went to school and Pete skipped school. But they kind of all played together and joined this team together and became extremely successful. And because they kind of had an established team, it was a much easier transition to start a league with teams that were already kind of established like that. So that's kind of how Louisville ended up kind of joining into the AA. But the Eclipse kind of eventually becomes the kind of dominant club. There was also the Louisville Grades at the time, but again, they didn't have a huge gambling scandal, and that kind of takes them out of the picture, and the Eclipse just kind of gets more attention focused on them.
Well, it wouldn't be a true baseball club in the 1800s if there wasn't a gambling scandal somewhere in there.
Gambling and drinking.
And adventures with farm equipment and maimed hands, which we've noticed a lot of the guys we talk about had farming accidents. So
Pete did not. Pete was not a farmer, so he did not have any farming accidents, but he definitely had the drinking side of it down.
Oh yeah, well that's definitely something that goes with that era of baseball.
So I'm interested to see if any of the things that we think we know about Pete that we talked about back in episode 157 are actually, how true are they? Or are they kind of in that Ricky Henderson space where, 90% of those stories sound completely plausible, so we believe it. He's got a couple of nicknames. We've covered that before. The Louisville Slugger and the Gladiator. Both are great baseball names and great stories, at least we believe, behind them. Can you give us some background on those nicknames?
Sure. So before I get into those, he had a number of nicknames too. He was known as the Old Warhorse, the Prince of Bourbon, Red Light Pete, Line 'em Out Pete, Old Pete. So he was a man with a lot of names, but probably the most famous would be the Louisville Slugger and the Gladiator. The Louisville Slugger doesn't really become attached to him till towards the end of his career, and there was a headline in the paper at the time that called him the Louisville Slugger. So that wasn't necessarily a nickname that he had throughout his career. Like 1893, there was an article, but then obviously becomes famous because then it gets attached obviously with the Hillich and Brasby companies, and they start using that as kind of the name for their bat. So that kind of sticks. The Gladiator is probably his other most famous nickname. That actually doesn't come out until, or at least the earliest that you could find in the paper, about 1887. And then it starts getting used. It's hard to find exactly who first used it. There's an article in 1887 that kind of just talked about him. I'm referred to him as the Gladiator with no other kind of reasoning, but it seems he got the name because he was very combative with the press, because he was combative with fly balls in the outfield, and he had a number of those kind of issues, and he could have kind of a prickly, kind of standoffish kind of personality. But early on in his career, he was more often known as Line 'em Out Pete, and quite simply just Old Pete.
It sounds like Gladiator might have been stuck on him by the press as kind of a we're safe for work here, so I'm trying to think of the way to say it, but he probably turned it in. It sounds like he turned it into more of, you think of Russell Crowe kind of Gladiator than the Gladiator, because he's always fighting with the press and fly balls.
Yeah, I don't think Pete was ever upset at any press. You kind of mentioned some of the stories you guys had, and I think the interesting thing with Pete is there's obviously truth in all those stories, but he wasn't upset about any press. He was happy to talk about himself, and he was happy when other people talked about him as well. So I don't think any nickname was ever really a bad nickname in his mind.
So The Louisville Slugger, something now in baseball that is synonymous with bats and Louisville, Kentucky, and just, baseball in general. But Pete had a special relationship with bats even before his relationship started with a special bat maker there in Louisville. Can you tell us about his Ichiro-like obsession with bats?
Yeah, I think more so than many other players of the era, like Pete recognized the value of kind of the tools of his trade and that the bat has a lot of influence on what happens here. And so he really took care of them. And he took care of them to the extent of not just making sure that it was a good piece of lumber to swing, but like he would talk about like, hey, if I'm playing a certain pitcher, I want to have a heavier bat or a lighter bat so I can swing it. So he kind of started that idea of really thinking about the value in it there. And he was known when he went to other games to go look through the stack of bats other teams had. And if he found one he would like, he would try and trade for it. But he always would watch other players and see what they did. And he became extremely superstitious about his bats. He believed that they all had a predetermined number of hits in them. And when the bat ran out of hits, then it was done. And I think the easy way to understand when that was done is if, he had a bad game, if he went 1 for 3, then that bat probably didn't have any more hits and it was time to put it away. He was known to soak his bats in water because he wanted them to be heavier, right? He felt that you got to swing the biggest lumber. He was known to take old tobacco juice and rub it on there to harden it up. So he kind of had all these kind of superstitions as well. And so he said, I'm going to go ahead and put tobacco juice on here to harden the grains, and it's going to make it a better bat. Or if I have a heavier bat that's been soaking in water, it's going to be a better bat. And who's to argue with the results that he kind of put out on the field?
Did he ever have a voodoo doll that he offered rum to in the clubhouse for his bats?
I don't think he would so willingly part with rum to a voodoo doll, so I'm going to say no on that. I think he was very much going to keep that rum for himself. And I know Jobu would be upset with that, but I think that he would understand that Pete needed his rum.
What did he do with his bats after they were out of hits? Were those ones he traded, or did he do something else to them?
So two interesting things about Pete. He actually was very generous with his bats. He was known to loan them out and give them to other players. But the bats that he kept, he eventually retired to the basement of his house. He lived with his mom his entire life. And he also would tag them with a card with what that bat was known to do. In 1887, I stung a double for 2 RBIs or something like that versus St. Louis, and he would write them on there. There's a famous story of Honus Wagner when he was in Louisville. Pete had kind of befriended the team at the time, and he was talking to Honus Wagner, and Honus Wagner came over and saw one of the bats he liked, and Pete gifted it to him. And, I think it's fair to say that there's a good chance that that's where, Honus Wagner comes to kind of find out the power of Hillich and Bradsby and the Louisville Sluggers, because he's eventually going to put his name on a bat there. So I don't think it's wrong to think that was his first introduction to kind of the power of those types of bats there.
Very interesting. I'm curious to know, in this time frame of baseball, and I don't believe we know this answer, so I'm excited to see what you have to say. How often were bats broken at this point? I know bats were kind of, we did a whole episode on just bats, and they weren't very heavily regulated until, a certain time where you could basically bring a spoke from a wagon wheel or and there were flat-sided bats. How often were bats broken at this point?
I can't say. There's a lot of stories of bats being broken and players kind of just nailing them back together or just, fixing them however they could. As far as the number of bats, I read a whole lot of game stories, and that isn't something that was regularly mentioned within there. Some players were known to, when their bats broke, to, nail a piece back on there or just do whatever they could to get it going, whereas Pete felt, this bat has to be perfect. And if it broke or splintered, he would find another bat, and that would get retired away.
So he swung a very heavy bat too, didn't he? You mentioned that he swung different bats depending on the pitcher, but what did he swing?
If I had was it 37 inch? And I should have these numbers, but a 37 inch, 46 ounces. I think it's somewhere there. It was a monster club. And again, not all of them were exact. It wasn't like he always went in and said, "Give me this." He was very much by feel when he got his bats made, and he had a number of bats made. It was a monster of a bat. And even the bigger thing, I think, is not just the length and the weight, is that the handle wasn't tapered a whole lot. So you needed a big set of hands to hold it. Like, it didn't have much of a taper down below.
Yeah, that's kind of coming back. Like Jeff McNeil uses a bat that has no knob on it. He did when he won the batting title, and now he can't hit, so he's changed. But let's talk about some things that he did that I found. I mean, when we did stories on like Satchel Paige, he had this juice that he would rub in on his elbow that nobody knew exactly what was in it. But Pete thought his eyes, and you know, he's apparently, for somebody that didn't go to school, very smart when it comes to baseball stuff. You know, Tony Gwynn, Ted Williams, all these guys were focused on their eyes and being able to see the ball, and knew how important the vision was in the sport. Pete did as well. Can you tell us about some of the things that he did that he thought at least helped his eyes?
So Pete did a lot to take care of his eyes, and it's easy to look at a lot of that on the surface and go, oh, he's just trying to do this. But Pete had a lot of health issues. He had mastoiditis, which caused a lot of pain and swelling in his eyes as well, which was related to an issue he had with his ears, but it also caused pain and swelling in his eyes. Now, he was aware of the value of eyes. I mean, you need to have good eyes to track a baseball so you can hit it. So with his eyes, it was a way to improve his eyes, but to me, it also appears it was a way he was, you know, self-medicating. He's a man of limited education, and, you know, medical advances at that time were obviously much different than they are now. So a lot of what he was doing with his eyes was on some level just trying to relieve the pain. And it doesn't sound as fun to say that. It's more fun to say he rode in train cars and hung his head out the window and hoped to catch a cinder in the eye, because that's a whole lot more entertaining than going, well, you know, his eyes were hurting, so he poured buttermilk into them because it probably soothed how it felt. He would smoke cigarettes and exhale the smoke out through his nose so that it would go into his eyes. He believed that he could go and like brighten up his eyes by looking at the sun and staring at it. When it rained, he would walk with his head kind of up so that the rain would come and wash his eyes out. Now, we can just keep it there on the surface, but when you start thinking too that this is a man who did have some real problem with his eyes, I think it's easy to understand that he was also trying to possibly like self-medicate and trying to figure out how to solve this issue and his problems he had with his eyes, this lifelong issue. The whole thing of Pete. A lot of these myths and stories, there's a reason for it, but it's a whole lot more entertaining when you just talk about it on the surface there. And it's great to talk about these crazy things he did with his eyes, and he did do them. But I think there's a deeper reason than just like, oh, well, you know, if I stare at the sun, it brightens my eyes and look, I can hit. I think he was actually trying to like find solutions to an actual problem that he had.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to know, because, you know, again, I am a huge Rickey Henderson fan, and I at this point know which stories are true and which aren't. But you hear these stories, and to get behind, you know, the reasoning as to why these stories even exist are very interesting.
I think with Pete, there's a lot of that. Like, I mean, things he said, stuff he did, actions he took, like, it's great on the surface and it gives him this great character. And he was a great character. Don't get me wrong on that. But I think there is a lot of kind of underlying reason he did these different things. There is reason why he, you know, said some of the comments. And a lot of the stuff that he's known for has maybe kind of been, you know, I don't want to say twisted, but like taken out of context, or it's evolved a little bit and there kind of becomes the myth that they're folk of it. So I think that's also becomes very interesting with Pete.
So maybe to go off of that, one of the other stories that we heard was that on defense that he would stand on one foot. One, is that true? And also, did you find out the reasoning behind that?
So he did. So I think that's another thing, right? Is there's this definite like myth of Pete being a horrendous fielder. Now, he wasn't great at times, but early in his career, he was playing second base and shortstop. I don't think you're putting your worst fielder at those positions, even at that time. So I think the myth kind of becomes blown up a little bit. But really more what happened is he pretty much had almost lost his hearing by the time he was, you know, in his teens. I mean, he had some hearing, but it seems he was pretty much almost deaf. So if you're standing in the base path and you can't hear somebody approaching you and you're afraid you're going to get run over, you're going to try any way you can to deter them from running you over and to protect you. So he stood with his leg up and the knee kind of pointing towards a runner. So that runner would not run into him. So it was more of a self-defense mechanism for him. He was run over a number of times. And his move to the outfield is because of that. He played in the infield for a number of years. And one thing throughout his career is he was often written about how great he was in the field. Sports writers would talk about these amazing catches he had, how he leapt 6 feet in the air and snagged the ball. But they also can talk about how lazy he was. Now, was he lazy or was he afraid of getting run into? So he played in the infield for a number of years. but he kept moving further and further and further and further out of the base pass. So he was kind of, way backed up. Well, that's not exactly where you want your middle infielders. So they eventually move him to the outfield. Well, he does the same thing in the outfield. So he kind of had to use it as a defense mechanism. And I think over time, it became easier for him just to stand there and not move when he played defense and let somebody else snag the ball. But Pete, being Pete, couldn't just go, well, I can't here. I'm going to stand here. He had to then tell people, well, I'm doing it to save my energy because I'm more important at the plate than I am in the field. So I think he, again, the truth of it is he had a reason for standing with that leg up. It looked awkward, but he was really trying to protect himself from oncoming runners or a teammate who he couldn't hear approaching.
That's interesting. Now, I actually have a question about Pete's base running. Now, he had a unique approach to his base running prowess. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So he didn't want to slide. He believed it would hurt him. And he said, I'm too big a man to slide, it could lane me up. And again, he would always say, well, if I'm going to hurt myself, well, then I'm not going to be able to swing the stick here. And he kind of had a number of really funny comments about it. He was like, look, if I want to, hit a triple, if I want to land on third, I'm going to hit the ball far enough so I can get in there standing up. I'm not going to go in there sliding on my belly like the other players do. He also would comment how he doesn't need to slide because he doesn't want to increase his laundry bills and he doesn't need to get dirty doing that. But so he didn't slide. He didn't believe in sliding. He didn't want to hurt himself. He was afraid that he would hurt a leg or something like that. And again, as his career goes on, he definitely believes I am way more valuable at the plate than doing anything else in the field. And anything I do to impact that is not good.
Sounds like he'd be a perfect DH.
It's funny you mentioned that. So at the end of his career, he actually had approached a couple of teams in some of the different kind of, independent leagues at the time and said, I forget the term he used, but I want to just be a professional hitter. And he basically in simplest words, he was trying to basically be like a DH or just a professional pinch hitter. It never happened, but he was looking to do that. He would have absolutely. Think about the career he could have had if he didn't have to play in the field then and have those things.
So you mentioned some of his nicknames, and I found one that we love nicknames here, and I assign nicknames to just about everything. So when I saw Pietro Gladiator Red Light Distillery Browning, this wasn't though we kind of touched on it earlier. This probably wasn't a loving nickname, was it? It was kind of people kind of poking fun at him, but like you said, no press is bad press to Pete.
Yeah. I don't think those nicknames bothered him. he was known to enjoy the brothels, so I don't think it bothered him that part was attached to his name. And he never was like, oh, I'm drinking too much. There comes a point in his career, which I think is often overlooked. He does stop drinking towards the end of his career and really kind of starts trying to get sober there. But drinking at the time was viewed much different. And I don't think that there was the same negative opinion, or he didn't take the same negative opinion of it. And he had a lot of nicknames that were kind of alcohol related as far as them. They get Brown Jug Browning, they called him sometimes. So I don't think he found anything negative about it. So to him, it was never a negative. I don't think he ever felt that. And if he did, he wouldn't have expressed it. I don't think he would have ever shown that side of himself.
He would have been great on social media, I think. I would just love a Pete Browning today. It would be one, he could probably get a lot of his ails, his medical problems cured, but just the personality is exactly the kind of guy that baseball and social media could really use.
It's funny you said that, because there was a number of times within the book when I was writing it when I definitely had that feeling, and I said that in there. You can just imagine Pete at the time being well lubricated, kind of just with his handful of fans, and he had kind of fans who would flock around him when he would go out, but kind of just talking and doing the kind of things that Pete did, espousing on how great he was. And again, you can imagine that all of a sudden on social media, there's the video of him, he's probably not going to be on X or Twitter because he wasn't the best writer, but you can imagine videos of him just popping up of him saying these crazy outlandish things and, Pete's going to do this and Pete's going to do that. And I think he would have been an amazing presence.
Get he and Joey Votto together on TikTok and you've got the best thing ever.
We talked about his nickname, the Louisville Slugger. Does the company Louisville Slugger reference him at all?
Yes. So there's the story of Pete. And the story is in 1884, Peter broke his bat, and Bud Hillage, who was the son of J.F. Hillage, who was the owner of Hillage Company at the time, they weren't Hillage and Bradsby. He played baseball and offered to make a bat for Peter. Bud's father at the time was not into baseball because of a lot of the negative aspects associated with it. They weren't a bat-making company. They did other things that you can make with lathes, stair rails and chair legs and things like that. So the legend is, like under the cover of night, the two of them went in there and Bud turned Pete a bat as Pete kind of gave him direction and kind of like got the perfect bat. And the next day he goes out and has a 4 for 4 day, and the legend of the Louisville Slugger is born. Louisville Slugger tells that story. Now, one of the things I kind of said I wanted to find was that fact and fiction. Sometimes people want to doubt that story because in 1884, there was nothing in the paper or anything about it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mention at the time the company it was, because again, they weren't a bat-making company. But there's a lot of stories when he was playing in Pittsburgh that he was so excited because there was this delivery of bats from back home. But I don't think it's a huge leap to go, well, it seems to make sense that he's getting them from a company there. And then this company starts branding them the Louisville Slugger, and they start using his name as part of kind of the storytelling about their company there. Some other people tried to take claim to it, but I think it's safe to say that Pete, on some level, had a bat turned there. And because he was already a big name, he'd already won a batting title, he was kind of a well-known person, it's going to give some kind of credence or some value to that to the company there. Eventually the company goes from making all those kinds of other things and turning completely into the bat company. They eventually evolve into the Hillich and Bradsby company, and they make their Louisville Sluggers. There's other players who kind of take credit for it, but there's all these little small stories about Pete getting bats from at home and custom made bats from home and this bat from home or this bat from Louisville. And I just don't think that, there would be those stories if there wasn't the original story, even though that's not documented at the time by anybody. But Louisville Slugger itself absolutely has him as part of their history.
Just playing off of that, does Pete belong in the Hall of Fame?
I think so, but there's people way above my pay grade who are going to have a different take on it. I have talked to a number of people, Hall of Fame writers. I've talked to some other people, and I think here's how I look at it. I've had a number of people. I was talking with Jim Riggleman, and he kind of gave me two really good things to think about in the Hall of Fame. He said, one, you kind of can compare those people to the generation before and generation after, right? It's not fair to compare somebody now to, the 1920s because things have changed. The game has changed. Well, Pete really only has a generation after, right? There's really no generation before. And the other thing he said was, what did your eyes tell you when you watched him play, right? Because we can sit here and take all these numbers and you can make anybody seem like a Hall of Famer if you look at just the right numbers or not the right numbers or do this. And I think numbers too, you always have to put them in perspective and understand the era you're in, right? I mean, the number of home runs that Pete hit in 1882 doesn't seem as impressive now, but at the time he finished second in the league. I mean, he may only finish second one year with 9 home runs, but he was second, right? Now that doesn't seem impressive. So I think numbers don't always give us the true story. I think, what do our eyes tell us? And Pete at the time was generally thought of as one of the best hitters. And even after he retired, he was still written about that way. Now, I think the big problem was he played the bulk of his career in the American Association, which was looked down upon as not, the National League, even though it sort of seems there wasn't a lot of difference between the two. Players moved back and forth between leagues, and it seems they generally finished in kind of the same relative area, statistically speaking. Towards the end of Pete's career, despite having a huge, kind of problem with his head and the issues he was having health-wise, he finished third his first year in the National League. So I think that it's not fair to just completely discount the American Association. I think over time we've kind of tried to re-look at that and re-understand that. I mean, my belief is that, Pete needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, the stuff he's done, the batting titles and his role in kind of Louisville Slugger, I mean, he clearly was one of the best hitters at the time.
Is he on any of the committee ballots, that come up to vote every couple of years?
He has been, but I don't believe he's ever actually had a vote cast for him.
It's funny because, I say funny. It's strange. Let me say that, a lot of Hall of Fame voters, and I guess it probably is different with committees than, the guys that just retired, and you're getting guys voting that are still stuck on, just looking at batting average and hits and, kind of the basic counting stats that throughout the history of baseball have been important, that have kind of, divided baseball fans now between traditional stats and more analytical stuff. But I mean, you look at his batting average, he hit .341 for his career, had a .403 career lifetime on base percentage. I mean, that's 2 points higher than Ricky Henderson. Again, I'm sorry, I bring up Ricky. And, you look at the stolen bases. Of course, we know that stolen bases were counted differently back then, but he stole 103 in 1887 and didn't even lead the league, but he hit 402. I mean, some of these numbers are just outrageous, regardless of whether it was American Association or not. I mean, he has definitely got some Hall of Fame numbers. I guess my question would be, did he do it for a long enough period where he would be considered, that Hall of Fame worthy? But they're fun numbers to look at.
Yeah, I think that's definitely is one of the knocks against him is his career is a little shorter. And most of that I'm going to attribute to health issues. He plays basically 12 seasons. In 1894, he just has a couple of appearances. There's not enough understanding of how much his mastoiditis and his health was actually impacting him on a daily basis. Over time, there's a lot of stories towards the end of the career how much his mastoiditis was impacting him. He regularly had headaches and vertigo and was missing games. And I think, again, some of the humorous things that we find that he would do, there's a real reason for it. Late in his career, he starts kind of taking to stopping balls in the outfield with his feet. That sounds great. It's hysterical. But I think the logical reason is he had vertigo. If he bent over to try and pick the ball up, there's a good chance he falls over, right? I think we can make some of those connections like that. That all leads into shortening his career. And I think his short career, again, because it's easy just to look at those numbers and go, well, did he compile enough? Did he do enough? What did he do? And I think, it's easy to go, no, he didn't when you compare him to other people. But when you go back, and we unfortunately can't go to YouTube and just pull up games from Pete and watch him play, we have to look at what sports writers said and what other players said. And those people raved about him. They even raved about him kind of that next generation after he was retired. They were still raving about how great a hitter he was and what he did and all the amazing things he did. And they talked about him in these kind of over-the-top glowing terms. We can look at numbers, but numbers don't give us the full story all the time. Some of his numbers might be a little impacted because he played on some pretty awful teams, so he wasn't always getting the help that he could. People weren't getting on base in front of him. People weren't hitting behind him. That's going to have an impact on some of your numbers as well and things that he does. So I think there's a lot to it. His length of career impacts it. His health impacts it. I think the fact that it's, 19th century baseball and most people don't have a great understanding of what 19th century baseball looked like. I think all that goes into this, why he may not be in the Hall of Fame.
That's great. Thank you so much for talking with us, because this is covering a new story every week. We don't have the time. This is not our full-time job to be able to really dive into this. And, it was so fun to talk about him and these odd stories, but to get to hear that he had absolute reasoning behind them is really great. Do you want to tell us how people can get your book?
Book actually will be out in September. It's available for pre-sale now. It's coming out from the University Press of Kentucky, which is great because it's Pete's hometown. You can find it through any major bookseller. You can order it through the University Press of Kentucky. But I say if you have a local bookstore, there's nothing better than supporting your local bookstore and supporting a local Baltimore author, which would be me. But you can find it anywhere. It's available for pre-sale now. There'll be some events coming out starting in August, September, where if you're interested in hearing me ramble on a little bit more, we'll have some events and some book signings and different stuff like that. So kind of, follow me on the social media stuff and find me there. And you can kind of start seeing those events as we start kind of announcing those and releasing those.
Great. Well, we'll put all of this in the show notes as well. We'll put links to the University Press of Kentucky and all of your socials here so that people can follow that. And boy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to chat with you guys today.
All right, it's time for everybody's favorite part of the show. I mean, everybody's got to enjoy most of the show, I assume. But here is the part where we're going to open up some old baseball cards. Wax back hero! Gonna pull the wax back hero! The stars in his eyes. Hero! Today, a little bit different. We're going to open up some older baseball cards than we usually do. We have some curated packs from a listener, from longtime listener, Andrew Harner. So Andrew, first of all, thank you. Mark, you have got them, and you've got a little message here with them, I think.
Yeah, Andrew, basically, he wrote in and said that we had mentioned that we needed different names to talk about in our Wax Packs Heroes segment. And so he confirmed the address to send them to, and we've got them. We've got a bunch of them, and he set them up for the new format and everything.
All right, so this is exciting. So it should probably be some names we haven't heard before. So before we get into that here, let's go over the rules just in case you're new here. What we're going to do is we're going to open up these packs of baseball cards. We are going to take the baseball reference WAR of the year that the card is from, which I'm not exactly sure just yet. We'll see here. And we're going to add those together. It's 1v1. Mark gets one card, I get one card. Whoever has the highest total wins that round. First to 5 will win. So we're essentially playing war with war, but there are a couple of ways that you can add or subtract to that score. Any 80s baseball aesthetics. So we're talking about things like real stirrups, big glasses that are needed for vision, or big, sunglasses, flip downs, whatever. A good mustache, eye black. Basically anything on the face is going to get you extra 1/10 of a point. But 2-in-1s, stuff like that, we don't like that. That's a minus 1/10 of a point. If the person on the card won any awards that year, like Rookie of the Year, Cy Young, MVP, All-Star, won a Gold Glove, etc., that's a 1/2 a point for each. If there's a Hall of Famer on the card, whether they are the focus or not, that's a whole extra point. If there is a Ricky Henderson or Nolan Ryan card, if Ricky shows up in either pack, I automatically win that round. If Nolan shows up in any pack, Mark automatically wins that round. Any pop culture references we can find, that's a 1/2 a point each, unless they were on Seinfeld, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or The Simpsons, in which case that's a whole point for each of those. If they showed up on the Mitchell Report or were suspended during their playing days for certain things, that's another moving target. That is a minus 1/2 a point as well. So, Mark, these cards, are they all from a specific year?
They're all from 1973.
Wow. Okay. I was barely born at that point. You were smoking Marlboro Reds already at that point.
Yeah, I was 49.
Yeah. You had already repeated your sophomore year of high school 3 times by that point.
Yeah, I'm no dummy.
Yeah.
I went to high school 8 years.
Oh, a lot of high school, yeah. So 1979. So I guarantee you we've probably not had many of these cards, if any. All right, Mark. So you've got two packs here. You want to choose which one you want?
No, I think you should, because I can see the cards.
All right. Well, I'm going to go. You always go on the right. I'm going to go to the left.
Okay, you got it. So, all right, we're going 1973, and these are going to be some fun names. So here we go.
All right, is this my card or your card?
This is yours.
All right.
Texas Rangers third baseman Dave Nelson.
Nelson or Nilsson?
Nelson, as in Charles Nelson Riley.
Not Dave Nilsson, the Australian brewer.
No.
All right. David Earl Nelson, 10 years in the big league, 6 with Rangers, 2 with the Royals, 2 with Cleveland. Let's see. 1973, his lone all-star year. I like that. 142 games at second base. He hit .286, 325 on base, 7 home runs, 48 RBI, 43 stolen bases. I like it. And a OPS plus of 102, and that will be good for a WAR of 3.1.
Wow, very nice.
Now, I cannot see these cards. I will add on the All-Star there year for it, but is anything on this card going to help me out?
It's kind of a distant shot, like you can't even make out his face, so I couldn't tell you if he had facial hair or not. But he is playing against Oakland.
Well, I mean, that's good. How are the stirrups looking?
You can kind of see 73 though. I think this is pre.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get any 2-in-1s. So let's just say if you can see stirrups, they're real.
Okay, I see stirrups.
All right, so
I see one.
We should give out points for if you can see both or not.
Well, interestingly, these 73 Topps cards, they have a fun fact about the player on the back, and so we'll have to include those. Dave is interested in photography.
Now, is that really fun?
Well, yeah, maybe it's not fun, but it's interesting. Well, maybe it's not interesting.
Unfortunately passed away from liver cancer in 2018 at the age of 73. He did some coaching for several major league teams, helped some players like Kenny Lofton, Scott Pasednik, and Richie Weeks. Also helped Bob Uecker out when he was away having heart surgery. He worked the road games for the Warriors. Or for
cool.
I said for the Warriors because I said road, and I've been watching a lot of wrestling documentaries, so I had Road Warriors on my head. But for the Brewers, well, they were on the road. So that'll be a 3.7 for me. What about your card, sir?
Okay, I have 11-time NBA title holder and center for the Boston Celtics, Bill Russell. Oh, wait, no. This is the baseball player, Bill Russell.
Oh, okay. I know.
Shortstop for the Dodgers, Bill Russell.
Yeah, now I think the Dodgers definitely, and that's because he played for 18 years, all with the Dodgers.
Yes.
Good news for you. 1973, also an all-star year for Russell. He had 3 in his career. Also a member of the 1981 World Series team. I do not remember if he went on Solid Gold and sang "We Are the Champions" or not. I don't think he was part of that, fortunately for him. Led the league in games played in 1973. He played all 162 at shortstop. Came in 32nd in the MVP voting.
So close.
There's a lot of votes being handed out if he came in 32nd. Hit 265 for the year, 301 on base, 4 home runs, 56 RBI, 15 stolen bases, and 80 OPS plus. And that is good for a 2.8. He does get the All-Star bonus, which will put you at 3.3. Is there anything else that is going to help you on that card?
Absolutely nothing. It's like just a bust, no facial hair.
No stirrups.
I mean, it's just upper. Yeah, no. If he had stirrups on, they'd be hanging from his ears. So.
Now, it is interesting. Russell did lead the league in defensive WAR this year with a 2.3, leading me to believe that he was a good defender.
Yeah, I would think so.
Well,
he was on that infield that was like Ron Say, Davey Lopes, Steve Garvey.
Yeah, I guess he was, wasn't he?
Yeah. Ron Say, by the way, and I went to the same high school, Mount Tahoma.
Didn't he?
Some people call it Mount to Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Ron Say also went to Washington State for a while.
That's right. There you go.
We bring this up every time.
Every time. Have to.
Yeah,
he's my high school.
Tommy John called Bill Russell the best shortstop that ever played behind me. Then
Very nice.
Also went on to do some coaching and managed the Dodgers for 3 years, 96, 97, and 98, where they finished second, and third. Tommy John also said he wasn't a flashy dresser, didn't have a fancy house or car. Those things weren't important to him. He's a blue collar kind of guy.
Regular dude.
Good news for me is I will win that round.
Yeah, that's good news. All
right.
Fun fact. Here's the fun fact.
Yeah.
Bill first played shortstop in the Venezuelan League in 1971.
Jeez, I mean, I think the word fact is doing the heavy lifting here.
He came in as an outfielder. I think that's what they mean. That's when he learned to play.
Still
shortstop.
Not fun, but a fact.
Yeah, well, it is a fact.
Next card. My next card.
Your next card. New York Yankees pitcher Steve Kline, Kline.
That was going to be Steve Howe, and then we were going to have some...
Well, we would be subtracting points.
Let's see, Steve Kline. I remember Steve Kline, the contemporary Steve Kline.
Yeah, he's not a bad pitcher, actually.
Yeah, so Steve Kline, 6 years in the big leagues, 5 with the Yankees, and then split some time between Atlanta and Cleveland. 1973, he had a couple of really good seasons in 71 and 72. 73, not so much. Went 4-7 with a 4.0 ERA, 74 innings pitched, 76 hits, only 19 strikeouts, a 92 ERA plus, and that will be good for a WAR of 0.1. Looking for some additional help on the card. Anything?
No, there's nothing. We got some sideburns, maybe.
No, sideburns only count. Unless they're like good lamb chop sideburns, like down to his lip.
They're just typical 70s sideburns.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're getting those Brady Anderson sideburns in the 90s or early 2000s. He was involved in a trade with the Yankees, kind of a big trade. He was traded with a couple of players to Cleveland for Chris Chambliss, Dick Tidrow, and Cecil Upshaw. So wow. I know all of those names. That obviously was I'm going to say it was a good trade for the Yankees.
A little local flair for me again. Pitching coach at Wenatchee High School in Washington.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And here's your fun fact. Steve's high school nickname was Sunshine.
Okay.
It's kind of fun.
Probably had maybe he had a good outlook on life.
Sunshine Steve.
Unfortunately passed away in 2018. Is there a theme that all of these players have passed away?
Well, I mean, they possibly. Are 73.
Yeah, they are 73. All right, so you've got to beat a 0.1. Can you do it?
Well, we're talking about a Texas Rangers pitcher, Horacio Pina, Pina, Horacio Pina.
All right. I have not heard of Horacio Pina, but he was
a senator and then, of course, became a Ranger when they became the Rangers.
Oh, You said senator, and I'm like, wow,
He was a senator.
Usually they become a senator after their playing career, but the congressional baseball game, there were scouts there, and they're like, this guy can really play, and then the Rangers signed him. Let's see. Overall, 8 years in the big leagues: Texas, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Oakland, California, and the Cubs. 1973 was with my Oakland Athletics. He went 6-3 with a 2.76 ERA, appeared in 47 games out of the bullpen, had 8 saves, 88 innings pitched, 58 hits allowed, 41 strikeouts, a 129 ERA plus. He was a member of the World Series team in 1973 here for the A's.
Nice.
And that will equal a WAR of 0.7.
Okay.
Nothing else is going to help him. No awards or anything that year. Anything on the card going to help me?
No, nothing.
Wow, he had a really good playoff in 1973. He appeared in 3 games, pitched 5 innings. He gave up 9 hits, but no earned runs. He walked 3, but struck out 1. So it's not, I think his defense helped him out quite a bit there, but the ERA of 0 in the playoffs, pretty good.
Yeah, not bad.
So unless he was in the Mitchell report for some reason.
No, but he is in the Mexican Professional Baseball Hall of Fame.
And I can see why here. In 1975, he threw a no-hitter, and then in 78, a perfect game while posting a 21-4 record with a 1.94 ERA.
Very nice.
Wow, very nice. That's right. All right, so that round will go to you. We're tied up at 1. What's my next card?
Your next card is San Diego Padres catcher Fred Kendall.
I bet that's Jason's father, isn't it?
Oh, you know what we forgot? The fun fact.
Oh.
Horatio Pena does magic tricks.
All right. Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
All right. I'll give him to that. All right. Yeah. As suspected, Fred Kendall, father of Jason Kendall, he likewise was a catcher, played 12 years in the big leagues, 10 with the Padres, and then Cleveland and Boston for a season each. 1973 in San Diego, 145 games behind the dish. Let's see, he hit 282, 320 on base, 10 home runs, 59 RBI, and a 106 OPS plus, and that is good for a WAR of 2.9. Now, I think Fred usually wore glasses. Is he wearing them here in this?
He is not, but he has a non-ear flap helmet.
I think, yeah, everyone will get that if they're wearing it, which probably a lot of them are at this point.
Yeah, he's the only one so far that has it on. So,
it's interesting. We talked about George Sisler at the beginning and a first baseman with speed. Fred didn't have a lot of speed, stole 5 bases in his 12 years, but his son, Jason, remember, was always a pretty good base runner as a catcher. 189 career stolen bases for a catcher.
Yeah.
Including several seasons with 20 plus. Very good.
Nice. Okay. So what was his total?
Let's see. Total is 3 even. Do you have a fun fact for us?
Fun fact. Here it is. Fred tied for the Northern League lead in double plays with 6 in 1962. That's
again, that's a fact. It is not a fun fact. Nothing pop culture wise or anything else. No mustache or anything. Every picture.
No, these guys are all pretty clean shaven.
They'll play for the Yankees or something. All right, so you've got to beat a 3. Who's your card?
The one and only Chuck Taylor, pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers.
If he was pitching today, he would be wearing some custom shoes.
You're darn right he would.
Let's see. Chuck Taylor, overall 8 years in the big leagues, 4 with Montreal, 3 with St. Louis, and then 1 for the Mets, 1 for the Brewers. Let's see. 1973 for Montreal, 2-0 mark with a 1.77 ERA. This is only in 8 games, so not a big year. 20 innings pitched, 17 hits, 10 strikeouts, a 2.18 ERA plus, and that will equal a WAR of 0.7. Anything on that card going to help you out?
No, nothing. Just he looks like he doesn't really care to be there. We do have a fun fact, though. Chuck served in the Tennessee National Guard.
Again, maybe just fun facts in the 1973 were just a lot different than they are today.
Fun was different back then.
I mean, fun fact would be Chuck Taylor has 3 nipples. Just anything other than, he led the minor leagues one year in, plate appearances. That's not fun. Let's see. I don't see anything, certainly nothing pop culture wise. So that's going to be another round for me. I'm up 2-1.
All right. All right, 2-1. And your next player is Boston Red Sox second baseman Doug Griffin.
All right. Doug Griffin, I am not familiar with. Overall, 8 years in the big leagues, 7 with Boston. His first year in the big leagues in 1970 was with the Angels. After that, he was a Red Sox all the way. That'll help our Red Sox podcast ranking. 1973, as a second baseman, appeared in 113 games, hit .255, .293 on base. Let's see, 1 home run, 33 RBI, 7 stolen bases, a 70 OPS plus, and that will be good for a WAR of .4. Anything on the card going to help me out?
Real stirrups.
All right,
I got that. Yeah, and something interesting. Suffered a lot of injuries during his professional career, including being beamed by Nolan Ryan, knocking him unconscious.
Wow.
He left with a concussion and temporary hearing loss. Wow. And then beamed again by Dick Bosman, experiencing hearing and equilibrium problems.
Wow. I can understand it because I hit myself in the head with my bat because I was mad. Just with the knob on my bat, I just kind of whacked it, and my ear was ringing for literally a week. So I understand it. Now, that's interesting because at one point, to get from the Angels to the Red Sox, he was traded, and part of the trade was Tony Conigliaro, who obviously, famously, well, I don't want to say obviously because I don't know who's listening and how much they know, but was hit by a pitch by Jack Hamilton. And that was a very serious injury to Tony Conigliaro. So,
yes.
Do you have a fun fact for him?
I don't know how fun it is, but Doug served in the Navy in 66 through 68.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun. He passed away in 2016. After baseball, worked in construction. Oh, okay. So after being hit and experiencing the hearing loss, he began wearing an ear flap on his helmet. So maybe he was the first one to start wearing those.
Yeah.
Anything else in the card, though?
No,
stirrups.
Nothing.
Yeah, stirrups.
Yeah, just the stirrups.
So, okay, so .5. And your next card is?
Steve Barber, California Angels pitcher, lefty.
All right, Steve Barber.
Pitched for a long time, imagine that.
Yeah, 15 years in the big leagues. Just a whole bunch of teams. Baltimore for 8 was the most. 1973, winding down his career, as you said, with the California Angels, appeared in 50 games, went at 3-2 with a 3.53 ERA. 89 innings pitched, 90 hits, 58 strikeouts, a 100 even ERA plus, and that will equal a WAR of .8. Anything else in the card going to help you out?
We got the stirrups again.
All right, so that's .9.
I think nothing other than that.
Yeah, I think you're going to win this round because I don't see him going backwards unless his fun fact is just something that is...
He's got a fun fact, and then there's something that's just mentioned below that's even a more fun fact, in my opinion. So here's the fun fact. Steve tied for American League lead with 8 shutouts in 1961.
Again, fact.
Fact. It wasn't fun for the other teams.
No.
Okay. Here's the other one, though. Steve combined with Stu Miller to hurl a no-hitter for the Orioles in a losing cause on 4/30/1967.
Who took the loss on that? Him or?
Yeah, I don't know. It just says combined no-hitter losing effort.
Yeah, so one of them had to, well, I don't know, maybe there was some errors involved. I don't know. Now, this would be a fun fact. Bucked baseball superstition in war number 13. See, that's a fun fact.
Yeah, that's more fun.
Third nipple quality of a fun fact there. Also, unfortunately, passed away in 1978. All right, so you win that round. I'm assuming these cards are put here specifically to reach a 4 versus 4 winner take all in the last round. But what is your next card?
Your next card.
My next card.
Yes. Cleveland Indians catcher Ray Fosse.
Oh, I almost used him today in Immaculate Grid, but I went with Ron Hassey instead. Well, this is good that I get Foss.
Yep.
The Marion Mule. I know he's passed away. Let's see, 1973, I'm going to guess he was on a World Series team. That was the only of those back-to-back-to-back A's teams that he was on that won the World Series. He was in Cleveland before that. Overall, 12 years in the big leagues, 8 for Cleveland, 3 for the good guys, and then Seattle and Milwaukee at the end of his career. 1973, he hit 256, 291 on base, 7 home runs, 52 RBI, 2 stolen bases, 85 OPS plus, and that is good for a WAR of 3.1.
Very nice.
Anything, has he got that mustache going on?
No mustache.
No, is he wearing his glasses?
No glasses, but
What
he
the
does
heck?
have the helmet. He's got the helmet.
The no flap helmet?
Yes.
All right, so we'll take that. No awards this year. I mean, he did get a ring, but we're not counting that. First round draft pick by Cleveland in 1965, and if you have not seen the picture of him from his rookie season where he's dressed up, you should do that.
Absolutely.
It is a treat. To me and to A's fans, he's famous for a lot of things, but probably to most baseball fans, most famous for being just trucked by Pete Rose in the All-Star game. And
1970.
He was injured from that. That is not what actually injured him for the rest of his career. He was trying to break up a fight in the clubhouse between A's teammates when that happened.
Yes.
But yeah, boy, it just one of the most loved in the franchise players for Oakland, and then obviously went on to be an announcer until he passed away 2 years ago. What's a fun fact about Ray?
Fun fact, Ray led American League catchers with 16 double plays in 1971.
Like he hit into 16 or he turned?
And, well, it's a little drawing of a guy catching a ball.
I don't know, I'm going to assume he was involved with that.
Yeah, I've got to read a little part of the card here because it's interesting the way they put this. Ray considers his most interesting baseball experience to be the collision at home plate with Pete Rose in 1970 All-Star Game. That was the play on which Pete bowled over Ray as he scored the winning run of the game for the National League. His most interesting experience.
All right. This is interesting here. When he was playing for Cleveland, Jeff Torborg replaced Frank Robinson as manager, and he ended up platooning with Fred Kendall.
Interesting.
Professional podcasting. All right, so that's a 3.2 for me. What about your card?
Well, I've got a ball player that you will know, Cincinnati Reds outfielder Hal McRae.
Oh, should we play his post-game diatribe as a manager for the Royals?
We probably shouldn't.
Yeah, it could just be a lot of beeps.
Yes.
Father of Brian McRae as well. Overall, 19 years in the big leagues, 15 with Kansas City, 4 with the Royals. 1973, his first year with the Royals, 234 average, 312 on base, 9 home runs, 50 RBI, a 91 OPS plus, and that is good for a WAR of minus 0.7. I'm going to go ahead and just give myself the win here already. We'll look at some other numbers.
He doesn't even have the no flap helmet. He's got a flap on his helmet.
Of course, 1985, you won a World Series with the Royals. Only appeared in 3 games. Only had 1 at bat though. But still, you get that ring. That's all you care about.
Right.
Fun fact.
This is really not fun. Hal suffered a broken ankle in 1968.
Bill James said before that accident, McRae was a burner, a center fielder who could fly. After the accident, his speed was major league average.
Not fun.
No, that's not fun as well. So McRae was a very aggressive base runner, even after his accident, it looks like. And if you've seen some video of him from the 70s and 80s, going into second to break up a double play, it looks like it's a flying body block, a lot of times, where they're not even sliding. They're just throwing their bodies to the second baseman or shortstop. And that is Hal McRae definitely did that. Of course, he had quite a temper as a manager as well. So I win that round. Did you do the fun fact? I think you did. Yeah, the broken leg. Not really fun.
Broken ankle. Yeah, so fun.
All right, so I'm up 3-2. What's my next card?
Your next guy is another guy you will have heard of, Steve Yeager, catcher for the Dodgers.
I'm going to go ahead and give pop culture reference for Steve Yeager right off the bat. For one, he was a member of the Solid Gold singing team. Also appeared in Playgirl magazine.
Oh, nice.
So I'm gonna count that.
You and I both have.
Well, yeah, they did the podcasting episode and didn't sell any issues. Let's see, 15 years in the big leagues, 14 with the Dodgers. Boy, everybody ended up in Seattle in the mid 80s, as did Steve
Yes.
Yeager. 1973, only his second year in the big leagues, 54 games, 254 average, 340 on base, 2 home runs, 10 RBI, a 92 OPS plus, and a WAR of .5. I'm going to go ahead and give him the pop culture points, so that will be a 1 even. Anything in the picture on the card going to help me out?
Oddly enough, he's in a catching position, but he's not even wearing a helmet. He's just got his regular hat on.
Oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and say that's old school, and that's going to get me a 10th of a point.
And you've got stirrups.
And stirrups. Is he wearing the neck guard that he invented?
He's not.
I'm fairly certain that we'll find out here in a minute, but he's the guy that first wore that thing that hangs down from the mask to protect his throat. I'm assuming he got hit there at one point. Let's see, 1981 World Series. He was the MVP of the World Series. 2 home runs, 4 RBI, a 286 average, a 267 on base average. So I'm going to assume he did some stuff defensively that led to that World Series MVP.
I would assume so.
Hit 2 grand slams in one game in in high school. That would have been a fun fact. But what is the fun fact?
Steve Yeager's fun fact is Steve's hobby is auto mechanics.
All right. I mean, that's bordering on entertaining. Let's see. Caught Jerry Royce's no-hitter in 1980. Best throwing catcher in the game is what Lou Brock said.
Nice.
Yeah, here it is. Throat protector, injured when Bill Russell's bat shattered as he was on the on-deck circle.
So, again, we come around to Bill Russell.
Yeah, boy, these are all tied in.
Very nice.
He managed in the Golden Baseball League as well. Oh, here we go. Appeared on an episode of Family Feud, Playgirl magazine, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, was sued by the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, has been divorced 3 times, appeared in Major League 2, and Major League back to the minors as a technical advisor and a small role as Coach Duke Temple.
Nice.
And is a co-owner of Jersey Mike's sub franchise.
Oh, wow.
All right, so I've got a 1.2. Can you beat that?
Maybe. I've got California Angels outfielder Vada Pinson.
Vada Pinson. There's a name I haven't heard of for a while. I've clicked on his link before, though.
I remember him coaching for the Mariners, I believe.
Let's see, 18 years in the big leagues, 11 with Cincinnati, then the Royals, Angels, Cleveland, and St. Louis. 1973, 124 games as an outfielder. He hit 260, 286 on base, 8 home runs, 57 RBI, and a 91 OPS plus. And that is good for a WAR of .4. Is there anything on that card that's going to help you out?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
No.
Let's see here. Anything else that we can find that will help you? Oh, he's from Oakland. That's probably why I've heard of him. Oh, wow. Not good news. He passed away in 1995, but he is interned at Rolling Hills Memorial Park, which is literally 10 minutes from my house and also where Joe Morgan has been laid to rest.
Oh, wow.
I am definitely going to have to do this tour of cemeteries at some point here in the near future.
Yeah. You never know what you're going to find.
Yeah. All right. So I win that round. Fun fact. Yep.
Vada worked in aerospace and electronics in the off season.
Wow. All right. Smart guy.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Rocket scientist.
All right. My next card. I am up 4-2.
4-2. And you have Houston Astros outfielder Jim Wynn, Wynn.
The toy cannon?
The one and only.
All right, the toy cannon. Jimmy Wynn, 15 years in the big leagues, 11 with Houston, then the Dodgers, Yankees, Atlanta, and Brewers. 1973, the year right before he was at All-Star twice in a row. With Houston, he hit 220, 347 on base. That's pretty good for a 220 average. 20 home runs, 55 RBI, 14 stolen bases, 11 caught. 107 OPS plus, and that will be good for a WAR of 2.8. Anything on the card going to help me out?
He does have the helmet, no flaps.
I'll take anything I can get.
And no, that's it.
Was once traded with Lee Lacy, Tom Paciorek, and Jerry Royster to Atlanta for Dusty Baker and Ed Goodson.
Okay. And I see some pop culture points.
I would assume so. He was, let's see. Oh, wow. I have never seen the movie Apollo 13.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I already know what happens. So, spoiler, I don't need it.
I didn't watch Titanic for that very reason. The ship sinks, okay?
Let's see. Television footage of when rounding third base is shown as Apollo astronauts broadcast what they erroneously think is a live feed to a national audience.
That ties in with Vada Pinson.
Oh, aerospace, yeah. But I mean, the moon landing was fake, so...
Oh, right.
Does that count? But yes, it does count because it's in a movie. I'll take that. Very good. And passed away, unfortunately, in 2020. But the toy cannon, I mean, I know about him, especially when I was doing the Astrodome episode. His name came up a lot because he had so much power.
Oh, yeah. Great fun fact. Jim likes jazz music.
All right. Well, you know what? Again, it's better than just a fact. We'll take it.
And not to be confused with Johnny Hates Jazz.
Good reference. Nice.
That one came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was good. I'll give you a point for that. All right. What is your card?
My card is Jack Brohamer. Topps had the All-Star rookie even back then.
How do you spell that last name?
Brohamer. Second baseman, Cleveland Indians. All
right. I feel I might clinch the win here.
I think you might.
Let's see. Jack Brohamer. This guy's going to have nicknames if he's playing today. The Brohamer.
Oh, yeah, you know it.
Oh, man, the merch. Man. Oh, boy, I like this guy. Let's see. Overall, 9 years in the big leagues, 5 with Cleveland, 3 with Boston, 2 with the White Sox. 1973 and 102 games hit, 220, 291 on base, 4 home runs, 29 RBI, a 68 OPS plus, and that is a WAR of minus 0.6. Now, on his pictures here, he's got a lot going on that could help you out. Is there anything on the card to help you out?
It's kind of funny because the picture is him running away as he's being tagged, so you can't even see his face.
But I mean, can you see his batting helmet? Are there ear flaps on it?
Yeah, he's got the batting helmet and he's got the stirrups.
All right, so that'll be a minus 0.4. He apparently hit for the cycle at some point.
Oh, wow.
That would be a fun fact. 1977 with the White Sox.
It would have been really fun on this card because it would have been predicting the future.
Oh, well, then that card would have been worth a lot. What is his fun fact?
His fun fact is Jack builds engines for oil well pumps. Well, what a smart guy.
Again, it's not baseball related, so it is more of a fun fact, but that's a pretty boring fun fact.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. But the good news for me is that I have clinched another win. I am now leading you 5-3. I think I've won like 4 in a row.
Yeah, I started off with pretty well, but not so great lately.
Yeah. All right. But hey, these were fun. We've got a couple more. I think he said a couple packs too, right?
Yeah, we've got more.
All right. So we've got a couple of cards left over. We'll save those and we'll forward those on to again. This was fun. Thank you, Andrew Harner, for sending this. If you want to send some valuable 73 cards, that'd be great too. But no, this was cool. These are guys we had definitely not talked about, and I hadn't heard of some of them. So thank you very much again, Andrew Harner. And
that was great.
If anybody else wants to curate some packs, please feel free to. You can send us an email, which we'll tell you about here in a minute, or get a hold of us through many different ways, and we'll tell you how to get those to us. That's going to wrap up Wax Packs Heroes. Going to wrap up the episode. Once again, thank you again to Tim Newby for coming on and talking more about Pete Browning, which was good because we covered all the stuff that seems kooky about Pete Browning, but Tim was able to tell us, the kooky stuff wasn't so kooky. He was doing it all for a reason. And a very interesting guy, Pete Browning. All of the information on how you can get a hold of that book will be in the show notes, how you can get hold of Tim, all of that in the show notes again. So look there. Thank you again, Tim, for joining us. If you do want more information on us or anything else, you can find it all there in the aforementioned show notes, or just Google us. We are at 2 Strike Noise. That is TWO Strike Noise. Likewise with the email address, Mark.
Yes, also TWO Strike Noise @gmail.com.
All right. That's going to do it for episode number 255. We will see you again next week on the next episode of 2 Strike Noise.
Thank you. God bless you. Have a great day.